Riders Block is presented to you by Sandia Sportsbook, where sports fans go to drink, dine, watch, and win. All right, welcome back to another episode of Riders Block. I am your host, Journal Staff Writer Sean Reider, as always. Today we had a real special guest. Jason Eck, head football coach for the University of New Mexico, came in the studio, gracious enough to join us. Had an awesome conversation. Got into a lot of different things from staff hirings to, guys they added through the portal. Of course, the news that broke, Ryan Berryman is now the University of New Mexico's new AD. He got elevated from the interim in the wake of Fernando Lovo leaving for Colorado. So a lot of good stuff. As you guys, I think if you watch this, you probably know, Jason's pretty fun to talk to, and he gave us a lot of good stuff. So excited to share that conversation with you guys. But before we get into that, as always, want to encourage you guys, if you like this content, if you like the written content we're putting out at the Journal, please subscribe to the Albuquerque Journal YouTube. Please share these videos on social media. Your support is really what allows us to keep doing this. And if you like these podcasts, you want something a little bit different too, we have, awesome podcasts. James Yotis is, Prep Central. He does a great job there. This is a big time of year for prep sports, so he's getting after it. Jeff Grammer, Talking Grammar, he's doing a really nice job of all of that. And then, of course, I say it every live show. Jeff Grammer and I do the live shows every week. We love it when you guys give us your questions and all that. We love talking through them. I think it's why the show is so fun. So if we encourage you guys to keep tuning in there, and I wish I could give you a date that we're normally doing them, because we're kind of shuffling around week to week with basketball getting kind of crazy. But encourage you guys to be on the lookout for when we put that out, and as always to give us your questions. But with that being said, excited to share our conversation with Jason Eck, and hope you enjoy. All right, today I am pleased to be joined by Jason Eck, head football coach, University of New Mexico. What's going on today, man?
Excited to be here at the headquarters for the first time.
Excited to be here,
I didn't know where I was going. I thought I was lost. I was just on the wrong side of the building.
For those that don't know or don't visit the Journal offices, and I don't think many of you actually do visit the Journal offices, if you take, when you plug it into Google Maps, it takes you to, a weird parking lot that isn't actually the main parking lot, and that was, unfortunately, that was my mistake. That's where you ended up today.
Yes, but I was trying to figure out I was looking for Michigan plates there. Have you got New Mexico plates yet?
I have Michigan plates. Michigan plates in the Honda still.
I was trying to find them. I knew I was in the right place if I saw Michigan plates.
Michigan plates, that was on the other side of the building. Listen, I never know how to start these in particular. I never know whether to dive right in. There was a big piece of news yesterday that kind of makes that a little easier on me. You have a new boss.
I have a new
Athletic director, new AD, Ryan Berryman, elevated from the interim, of course. I know you kind of tweeted some complimentary things about Ryan yesterday, but what was kind of your reaction to that news?
I think it's really exciting to have a new boss you already have a great relationship with. And, really, since Fern has took off and Ryan was in the interim role, I've spent a lot of time with Ryan. We went up to Santa Fe, a couple times, and he's been very responsive. I mean, you can definitely tell he's been a guy who gets stuff done, and when he has urgency to get things done, which I appreciate. And he's hardworking, he's hungry, and you learn a lot getting thrown into stuff. I learned a lot my first year being a head coach, and he'll learn a lot his first year kind of running the show and being an AD. But he's got a great work ethic. I think he's got a great personality. And I think there's something special. I think this probably was his dream job growing up his whole life in New Mexico, and I know that resonates with a lot of our boosters and fans of having somebody who's, this is a pinnacle job for them, not necessarily a big stepping stone. So I'm excited about Ryan, and I think he'll do a great job. He's I know his background's in basketball, but I think he quickly saw this year good football can really help your whole athletic department.
Kind of on that note, I mean, ideally you get every hire right, and all that. But this was kind of a hire that was viewed by a lot of people, I think within the athletic department and outside the athletic department as really key to kind of keep the momentum of the athletic department. Of course, you're a big part of that momentum. Was this a hiring process you were able to have any kind of input in? Or were you kind of consulted about it?
I was. I thought the president did a great job, and the board of regents, the search committee. I had conversations with all those people about it, and I wasn't officially on the committee, but I definitely gave feedback on some candidates, and expressed my definite confidence in that Ryan could do it. And I know Coach Olin feels really strongly about Ryan as well. So I think that's, I think we're in a pretty good place right now, and football, basketball, track's doing well. I think we've made a lot of good hires recently with the head coaching positions in the athletic department. So I do think with the momentum we have, keeping things rolling, I think is a pretty cool thing.
I'm assuming you do not have any interest in kind of following the footsteps of one of your mentors and Alvarez and pulling double duty, football coach and AD.
I briefly considered it, but no. Maybe when I get older, I want to do that. But I still like coaching as my number one deal.
To kind of get a little, talk a little bit of ball to get going here. Portal's been closed for a minute. You guys have added guys via the portal. You've retained guys as well. Workouts have been underway, and you got a lot of guys coming back. Who know what to expect over the coming months. But it's a little different, right? As opposed to going in kind of a year one where nobody totally knows, what to expect in a lot of respects. How does the kind of messaging change to your team at this point in the offseason?
Well, a couple things. One, it's nice. With one portal window, we have a vast majority of the team here. We have 101 guys on campus right now, which is a big number. The roster limit, we have some designated student athletes, so I think at the most we could theoretically carry next year would be 112. 105 is the limit, but you have some guys who are grandfathered in. So a vast majority of the team is here, which is nice. And, I think we're way ahead of where we were at this time last year, but our expectations are going to be much higher than last year. So that, that's my message to the team is that, we have to keep raising the standard. And again, I think we'll be disappointed if we're not conference champions this year. I mean, that's clearly our goal. And there's 138 teams playing FBS football. 10 are going to be conference champions. So, to think that you can have even slightly above average effort and focus and discipline and things, that's not going to get it done. You got to really have things at an elite level. So, just encouraging our guys to keep, no excuses, raise the bar in everything we're doing throughout the week.
It's kind of a silly thing to say because you're literally in studio for a podcast right now. Of course, when you first got hired, and really for that first 6-8 months, whatever, you were doing pretty much every public obligation, speaking engagement, whatever you kind of got offered. You're an established name now. People know you're a known quantity. Do you feel the need to maybe dial that back a little bit, or are you still trying to attack that?
I'm still trying to attack it. There's a few things that sometimes you have to say no thanks. I know my daughter's birthday's coming up, and we were celebrating a family dinner, so I had to turn down one deal, and then we had a little water damage at the house that caused us to miss an event. But I'm still trying to promote everything that we can and getting out there. Again, I thought we had 2 amazing crowds last year out of 6 home games. I want to have 6 amazing crowds next year, so I still feel like there's a need to keep promoting the program.
Has the reception changed a little bit in the sense of you're at a speaking engagement, maybe when you first got hired, and a lot of people, maybe you see it in their eyes like, well, it's another guy kind of trying to sell me the football program, as opposed to, and now it's like, hey, this guy's great, or something like that?
Yeah, it definitely has changed. I spoke at an event with my car dealer, Rich Ford, and I spoke at the same event the year before, and last year everybody I think was looking at me like, who the heck is this guy? And this year, everyone wanted to say hello. So, no, you definitely you sense that, but that's it's exciting because I think the community is primed. We were able to get those 2 great crowds kind of with no expectations and no real buzz at this time last year. I have a friend and a guy I've known, DeWall, who's he's trying to raise season tickets on his own, and he's got about a group of about 100 people that he's recruited like new season ticket people, and that's awesome. He's out there kind of grassroots and getting new people involved.
And it's similar to kind of talk about the period and all that as well. This is I won't say it's a particularly slow time of year, but it's not particularly busy in some respects. Obviously, you don't have the portal open or anything like that. What is kind of spring ball starts at the end of the month? What is kind of the the focus for you guys right now as a staff right now?
Yeah, February is one of the quieter months on the calendar because it's a dead period for recruiting. You can't go on the road. You can't go on the road. You can't have even host recruits in town. So like all of the weekends in February, our staff was off, which is nice because we work a lot of weekends throughout the year. A lot of it right now is player development. We're trying to get the players in our roster better, and it's a little different focus in the spring. I want to get all 101 guys we have on the team better this spring. Obviously we're not going to have games where we play 101 guys next year, but for right now we got to get everyone better and try to see who rises up, who can beat who out. They were never really good competition with having so many guys in for spring ball. And then, now recruiting's starting to pick up. We have a junior day this Saturday where we will bring recruits on campus to show them around, tour them around. We call it junior day because they're high school juniors that way. So recruiting gets rolling, but we gave all the staff about a week off in February, and then when we have our spring break where our students are gone in the middle of March, we give those staff a week off. So definitely there's a little bit more time off this time of year than certainly the fall.
The self-scouting and kind of like that off-season process for you guys in terms of like projects and everything like that as well, that's always been kind of a fascinating thing to me. Is that something you guys kind of do at this time of year? Is that more of like a summer thing?
No, we're doing that right now. And, I think we're in different places on sides of the ball. We have, defensively, we have our, entire staff back. We also have, besides our seniors, we graduated. We didn't lose any, guy who played a lot for us last year to the portal on defense. So, they're streamlining. They're watching, a few things for some new wrinkles. They did a Zoom call with another FBS staff this week to, talk through some things. But they're a little bit more, tweaking things on offense. We had some new faces in that room. We had new coaches, and again, when you bring new guys in, you want them to bring their ideas. You want to try to elevate things, and I think Coach Walsh, Coach Lujan, and Coach Smith, who are new on that side of the ball, are helping slice. And I think college football has changed, and you got to keep evolving. You're going to have more and more new rosters. It's probably a little bit more similar to pro football than the roster turnover that you used to have. So, making sure our system is, easily teachable and we can get guys up to speed very quickly, I think is important. And then special teams are going through, a change as well with Coach Link being new. So, there's quite a bit of off-season studies. I know, Coach Booth, which I appreciate, during his spring break when he's off, he's going to go visit with a, coaching staff at Arizona State and visit with their O-line coach to try to, keep getting new ideas and new ways to develop.
You touched on one of the guys. The last time I talked to you, he had not been hired. And really, I think you guys aren't even a month into having your staff, like kind of your on-field coaching staff fully set and all that. Of course, you brought in Carson Walsh. I think like the second time I ever talked to you, you mentioned him and kind of that connection with Schleiss and all that he sort of had, if I remember correctly, and everything there. How did you kind of get a guy like that, a dude that has coached in the NFL, been a receivers coach in the NFL, into this building?
It was relationships, and I think it also the success we had made a difference. I mean, I don't think we would have been able to hire, a lot of probably 3 of our 4 guys that we hired, we couldn't have got a year ago. And I think it's a combination of the success we had and seeing, I don't think it's lost in the coaching profession that, we had 4 guys leave our program, moving up, probably if the Toledo Blade sent 4 guys to the New York Times, probably some writers would be trying to go to Toledo Blade saying, hey, this is a launching spot. So I think that doesn't hurt. So, getting those guys, Carson, I've had a long history with, we worked together at Winona State in Division II. And we had a heck of a staff at Winona State back then.
David Braun, I think, was there.
David Braun, Matt Entz, the coach at Fresno. The special teams coordinator, Zach Barton, who's at San Diego State. I mean, it was a really good staff we had in Division II there. Coach Sawyer, who I coached for, and Coach Walsh played for him and coached there, really did a good job of hiring guys. And so, that connections. And, he was at a little bit of a, crossroads, too, where I think he liked being in the NFL, and he liked that. But I don't know if he necessarily liked his position in the NFL. And then they had a little changeover this year. Stefanski leaves and goes to Atlanta. They get a new head coach. He was hoping maybe to get an elevated position there, and it didn't come through because even when Coach Lockett first left in January till when we hired Carson in February, kind of some circumstances changed that made it a good fit.
In terms of this kind of hiring, it's kind of unique too. Obviously, you hired, Zach Lujan to coach receivers initially, and then you move over Lujan to coach tight ends after, Walsh comes into the fold and all that. Was that kind of always the thinking in terms of maybe getting him in line, or how were you kind of approaching that? After Jared Elliott, of course, left to coach tight ends.
Yeah, once Jared left, I thought that was just a good option. Zach, quarterbacks is probably been his position he's done the most. He did that. The 3 years when I was the coordinator at South Dakota State for us and at Northwestern, he played quarterback. And, really, I think quarterbacks and tight ends have similar roles in what they have to know, because they're probably one of the few positions that needs to know all the intricacies in the run game and all the intricacies in the pass game. Really for the linemen really don't know much about the routes at all. They need to know a little bit of a 3-step drop. It's short routes versus it's deeper routes. And then receivers, same thing. Receivers really just want to know, hey, is it more of an inside run or is it an outside run? It's not, it's very dumbed down. But the tight ends and the quarterbacks really have to know the intricacies of both. So I thought his teaching progression would fit at tight end. And, I also knew that having the ability to get Carson, who's been a receivers guy his whole career, to get a guy who's ran an NFL receiver room as the main guy, to get him at the group of five level is, a heck of a deal. I think, look what, Dirk Cutter did, when he came back, after being an NFL guy and then was a coordinator and, at this level, did a great job when they had Genti and everything. So it just kind of fit together. And, again, I'm always trying to get guys in the right place. And, I've been impressed with Darius. Again, sometimes don't, I like guys who are kind of on the rise up and have proven themselves at lower levels. And, the work he did at Southern Utah these last 2 years is amazing. To have two different backs, one rush for 1,800 yards, one rush for 1,900 yards. That's a heck of a resume. And, he's brought some good ideas and discipline to that room. And he's been a former head coach, too, as well, which I always like to have. Had that with Coach Elliott last year, is having a former head coach. It's nice to have a former head coach on the staff. Related
to the staff, this is probably the question I got, outside of transfer stuff and all that. It's probably the question I got the most from fans and all that. Is Luke Schleissner coming back? Is Spence Nowinski coming back? What do you know about that? Of course, they are coming back. You kept Schleissner. You kept Nowinski. I don't know if worried is the right word here, but was there a level of concern after the year that you guys kind of had that maybe they would move on to something else?
Yeah, there's always some concern. And, Spence had some offers. And, again, I appreciate his loyalty. We gave him a raise, but he could have got a bigger raise by leaving, so I appreciate his loyalty sticking with us. But, I also like to, if you look at, just one of my philosophies is we have a pretty high spread between our highest paid guys on the staff and our lowest paid guys on the staff. And I want that systematically because if you can keep your coordinators in place, it keeps the overall system. Obviously, you're going to tweak it and, evolve from year to year, but your basics are going to stay more consistent, and that's easier for the players. Again, I'd rather have, we really have kind of 11 position coaches, and if the last few spots are turning over from year to year, I think we can make that work. But when the coordinators change and you're changing verbiage or changing systems, I think that really stresses your players. So it was big to be able to retain those guys, but that's part of my strategy of how I set it up. That's going to be hard for those guys to move. And obviously, if those guys ever get a great opportunity, a chance to coach in the NFL, the Big Ten, the SEC, heck, I'd be happy for them. But I do want to try to have. It's good to have some continuity on the staff, but I don't know if it's always good to have complete continuity, because I think it is good to have a new flow of ideas coming through.
Is that something you kind of thought about throughout your coaching career when you were an assistant and maybe a coordinator? Or is that something when you were a head coach, it's that makes more sense to approach like this?
I think it was something that I thought about even as an assistant. I probably started thinking about it more when I was a coordinator, because I think, when you're a coordinator, I was a little bit more involved in hires on side of the ball and things like that. And, I did see that. We had some years where, Coach Stiglmeyer, who I learned a lot from, the year I got hired at South Dakota State, we had 10 assistants there, and 4 of them were new my first year. And we ended up having a good year. We tied for the conference championship that year. And, he made a big deal about, hey, you have to, studies show, and I don't know if this is true, he just made it up, but he said, hey, studies show it takes you, 2 to 3 years to get everybody on the same page when you have this much turnover. But we don't have that time. We got to get on the same page right away. And, I think we did a good job of it. And, it did have me start thinking about, continuity and what spots were continuity more valuable. And, certainly I think the transfer portal has changed my thoughts a little bit too, because if you have so many new players every year too, I don't know if continuity in the staff is as big as it used to be, because, you might have a new room anyway, whether you have a new coach or a coach who's been there a long time, you may have to make all new relationships with a lot of your key players anyway. So every year I'm just looking at it, hey, I want the best staff I can put together, get the best team I can put together, and then we got to do a great job of meshing them and getting close once we get everybody in place.
In terms of putting that team together, you're probably, I'll throw you a compliment here, you're probably the best coach I've ever covered in terms of just going down a list and talking about guys you've signed and brought in and all that, whatever, one by one, giving us something on every single one of them. I'm not going to make you do that again because you already did that a couple weeks ago, but you had to get 27 guys through the portal. Out of all the guys coming in through the portal, you're going through workouts, you're going through stuff right now. Who are the guys maybe standing out in the weight room or kind of standing out to this point right now?
You know what? Clay Martineau is doing a really nice job. I just saw him this morning when I was in the treadmill. He was power cleaning 315 pounds. They were doing some heavy weights today, and that was an impressive number to me. And he moves really well. I'm excited to see him with the pads on because I think not only can he help us at linebacker, but we're hoping he can help us rushing the passer on third down. We were a little unique last year in that our edge rushers on third down were also kind of our normal down defensive ends. A lot of times you sub in those guys, but he's definitely one who has caught my eye. I think at tight end, two guys I'll mention. Trip Walsh, I think, has done a nice job. I think he's got a little, likes to play, likes to compete to him, which is impressive. I think Max Leeper has done a really good job as a freshman. He's really impressed me as a freshman, as a mature kid who likes to compete, is smart, is tough. We got to keep getting him bigger, but I could see him being a guy factoring in as a freshman if we can keep putting weight on him. Running back, I think Cam Matthews has really done a good job. He's an impressive guy in the weight room. The quarterback's coming in, and it's tough right now because we're doing a lot of walkthroughs right now. Like if they're going to throw 7-on-7. We can't be out there with him. But, I think both Cade Mitchell and Luke Moga are doing a solid job. Miles Williams, I think, is doing a nice job at receiver. And then Cole from Weber State.
Cole Millward.
Millward is doing a really nice job. I think he's an athletic guy that can help us and hopefully give answers there to keep Malik, inside of guard. So those guys stand out to me on the offensive side of the ball. On the defensive side of the ball, I think Jalen Charles is doing a nice job at defensive end. I think Albert, I don't even know how to pronounce Albert's last name. He's the
Tualak. I shouldn't try either.
San Mateo. I think he's done a really good job. I've been impressed with him. Hayes Baum, I think, is doing a good job as a freshman. He's a strong guy who likes to compete and has really done a nice job there. I think at corner, Armani Arnold is doing a nice job, and Eric McLean from Ball State's really doing a nice job as well. So a lot of guys there are stepping up, and then, we'll see. We'll get a feel. I haven't really got to see our specialist kick yet, but I'm anxious to see those guys kick in the spring here. So, happy with how guys are doing. Probably the bummer ones for us right now. Joey Olsen, ended up tearing his ACL.
Oh.
Yeah, so that's going to be a bad deal for, we'll see. He's got a great attitude. He's working really hard. I really like that kid, just his demeanor and his personality. He's got a good energy to be around. He's very motivated to try to get back for next year, but, we'll see. It definitely won't be like the start of next year. We'll have to make a decision probably at some point with how he's looking, just with, are we going to try to get a medical red shirt for him, or are we going to try to get him back at some point during the year? And then Troy O'Meary, I really like. I think he's a worker and likes to compete. He had to have a little knee surgery. His is not an ACL, so I'm very confident he'll be back for next year, but could cause him, we probably expect him to miss all the spring.
All the spring, but it could play this season.
Yeah.
Okay. And look, we kind of talked about it at that presser a couple weeks back and all that as well. Just kind of want to run through a couple positions. Of course, we talked a little bit about the quarterbacks last time. You have, your starter in Jack Lane coming back. He might miss a little bit of spring, but you remain optimistic, I think, that he will be there.
We remain optimistic, and we want to be smart with him. He's throwing the ball short distances right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think he hasn't thrown it really more than 10 yards yet. So, we want to be smart with it. He's played a lot of football now. He had. I want to say about 10 starts at Idaho. Then he had, 13 starts last year. So he's got 20-some starts, playing in this system. So, we don't feel like he has to get, even look at last year. He had one spring practice last year and, won 9 games as a quarterback. So we'll be very smart about him. And I think that the silver lining, if he misses, it gives us a lot of chance to evaluate the other guys, to evaluate Cade. I think Toa has really grown in his knowledge of the game, and then Luke coming in new. Very excited to see him with the pads on.
with the caveat that, of course, Jack missing time, if he did miss time in spring and all that, would, kind of change the picture of it. Maybe we fast forward to fall camp when everybody's kind of ready. Are you expecting to be kind of a true competition from the jump, or is it going to be more of, well, let's see if a guy can play his way to a point where we feel there needs to be a competition?
No, I think it'll be a competition, and again, I think I think Jack will get the first reps. The first time the ones go out there, Jack Lane will be in there. I think he's earned that right. But I also want to see, especially as we sorted out through the spring. And I think Luke, just being a little older, would be probably the prime candidate, but I wouldn't, put it out of, it's out of the realm of possibility for, Toa or Cade. And Gabe's doing a nice job too, our walk-on quarterback. If they do a great job, I'd want to see some other guys with the ones as well, because I think, when you're going with the first group, just everything around you is more normal. It's really tough to, and once in a while you see a guy who really does elevate the twos and things like that. But, a lot of times it's a better evaluation with other guys in the first group.
You talked about Toa in that press conference, just about how he kind of played his way really into that 3 spot, on the depth chart, throughout the bowl practice and everything there too. You just kind of mentioned his understanding of the game has really grown. How are you kind of seeing that play out of him? Because obviously he's a really fast quarterback. Like, he can make some plays with his legs. How is that kind of playing out?
I think he's growing in his understanding, and he's come a long way. He ran an offense in high school that was a lot different than ours. A lot of times they were under center, running the veer option things, split backs. So just the processing and things, I'm seeing an improvement on it, having his eyes in the right place. Really made some good steps, and he's certainly athletic and a hard worker. So I'm excited to see him continue to develop, and then. Cade's got a cannon. He might have our strongest arm now of any of our quarterbacks. I'm excited to see him grow. He's got to keep growing a lot in his understanding of the offense and things, but his raw talent is very good. And we got to keep developing him too. Cade kind of is a baby-faced guy, and he's an early enrollee. He should be still going to prom and stuff. So you look at Cade around the facility, and you think sometimes he looks like he snuck a year out of high school, which he did. So he got to keep developing, growing, but he's certainly talented.
I think you said William Hicks, Hampton transfer DB, is going to be a guy that'll get some looks at, at nickel star, that kind of position. You lost some guys there, of course, Albert Nunez, Kohan McCray, those kind of dudes. What is kind of the vision for that room right now in terms of the guys that might factor into that position?
Yeah, some of the guys we're looking at there right now, Hicks, I think Chris Gant, is a guy we're hoping to get on the field more than last year. He's a hard worker. And then another guy who's an X factor that we got to keep finding ways to get on the field is Drew Speech. I think he did a nice job for us last year. He's long, he can run. Right now, he's really going with the first group in our walkthroughs at the field safety, and that's Brawley has a little something where he's been in a boot lately. It's not nothing that is going to threaten next year. Or
same
anything.
Foot as the fall.
Yeah, same foot. Just and kind of showing some signs like. Not a stress fracture, but something that was showing that if we kept just going like we were going, it could end up being another stress fracture. So just out of precaution, we've been taking some off of him. So Drew's been going with the first group at that spot. But I think as Brawley gets back healthy, that might be another spot where we look at, Drew playing that nickel Sam, just looking at his body type. The two guys who played the most last year at that spot were Caleb Coleman and Kaiwan McCray. And Drew has a very similar body type to those guys, and probably even runs a little better, and probably has a little. He played some corner in the past, so he has a little better man skills than those guys. So I'm excited about his possibility coming up. But Hicks is showing some good things as well. I think Hicks is still adjusting just to the step up a little bit of a level, but that's a process sometimes.
Of course, it was kind of like one of the main offseason priorities. You guys, the cornerbacks, having to replace John Johnson and just getting more depth in that room. Obviously, you guys haven't put the pads on and all that, but what is, you got Abraham Williams coming back and all that too. What is kind of and Jaden Sheridan, what is kind of the vision for that room in terms of, who might be able to play from the get-go?
We're playing Abe at receiver now. So
Abe is receiver.
Abe is at receiver, and he's doing a good job. He can really run. He's got to take care of his hamstring because his hamstring was bothering him a little bit. But he's definitely a weapon who can really run and take the top off things and speed. And I think Coach Walsh will do a great job developing him. So on the DB side, I'm excited about that room. We got Frankie Edwards coming back, and he had a little MCL that caused him. He did in the San Diego State game called to miss the bowl game. We got to keep getting him to 100%. I think he's played the most of any of our guys coming back. we got to know what he can do. We got to get him healthy and get him ready to go. Ja Torres, really, came in then that San Diego State game and then started the bowl game, and I thought really did a nice job as a freshman. We got to continue to have him develop, but I think he's showed a lot of flashes. Eric McLean, I'm very excited about, and I liked him. He was a guy who Coach Elliott, before he left, he had been at Ball State with Eric, and I really think when you look at some of the transfers we've gotten, who we had previous experience with, whether it was the guys who came with myself and Slice from Idaho, whether it was our nose guard was at Texas Southern, Brian Booker, when Coach Loney was there, whether it was Austin Brawley or Brett Carhu, who Coach Nowinski had been with at Ohio U and Memphis. I mean, we had a really good hit rate with those guys. You know about him. You've been around them a year. It's not just watching the tape and then spending 2 days with him in the recruiting process. So Eric was that way, and I love the way he competes. And then Jaden Sheridan is coming back. He probably is not going to be fully cleared for the start of spring, but we hope that maybe halfway through spring he's going to get fully cleared. But he's doing a really good job. Looks fast. So I think we could have a really good room there with some good competition, going forward at corner.
A little bit more on Abe. I mean, of course, he has that history as a really good kick returner and all that as well. He can be dynamic with the ball in his hands. Was this more of a move to, let's see if we can max his skill set out a little bit there, or was it a move to maybe we need a little bit more depth in that receiver room, or was it a little bit of both?
It was more driven through him. But I was very open to it because of our receiver situation. I thought we needed to improve at receiver and get faster at receiver, and he's certainly fast. He's had 3 concussions the last 2 years, and his concussions are largely happening when he's tackling. So we think this is an opportunity. When you tackle, you're not leading with your head, but your shoulders there, your head often is all it's in the vicinity. So it can be a tough. A tough deal there. So hopefully this is something that can keep him on the field more, because that was an issue that way. And he's good with the ball in his hands. So I'm excited about what Abe can bring to the table, and it's a learning adjustment because even in high school he was a high school quarterback.
Was he really?
Yeah, he was a high school quarterback. So in an option offense, so he was an option high school quarterback, and then was a great kick returner and is really developed as a corner. He wasn't like a real polished corner, I think, when we first even got him at Idaho. So he's a developmental project, but he can really run. He's big. He's like Coach Link, one of our first workouts. He's the guy you kind of one of the guys you look at on the team. He's like, man, Coach Link. Hey, this is a guy who looks like the SEC guys. We had, and we got a few guys like that. Him and Darren Agu, but so I'm excited about what he can bring to the table there.
I'm going to jam through a couple of these real quick. I'm kind of a little dumb sometimes, and I put out a tweet yesterday, hey, we're doing a podcast with a special guest tomorrow, yada, yada. Like, send any questions if you have them. I probably should have said I'm doing a podcast with you, because I think it would have gotten more responses, but I think that would have been a lot better. Realize that.
Because if you just ask a special guest, all the questions are going to be red or green.
Yeah, red or green, right? Like, no, I probably should have said it was you. But the one that I kind of really liked, I mean, I don't know really how involved you are with this. This is from Invest UNM. We'll try and get this up on the screen. Any chance of X scheduling that 5th non-conference game? Why not take advantage of the Hawaii exception rule? Of course, you're playing at Hawaii. You have the option for a 13th game. Was that something you made a decision about or anything like that?
We plan on playing a 13th game, and I like to play
an extra regular season game, I should say,
and a 14th game,
an extra regular season game, I should say.
No, because I plan on playing games extra at the end of the year, so I wouldn't want to play another game during the regular season and wear yourself out and give you more chances for injury and things like that. So, you have the right to it. They have the right to week 0 as well, but. I think the way it's looking out, we're not going to play week 0. I think the way it's looking out, we're going to stay at 12. And I love our schedule. I think we have a great schedule. I was, excited to pick up North Dakota State. I think that's a game that's going to improve our strength of schedule. And again, we really didn't lose a traditional rival. I mean, I think the game it took out was Northern Illinois, who we hadn't played in a long time anyway. So I think when you look at it, that gives us it's going to be a greater challenge, but it's a greater opportunity to improve our resume next year.
All right, some quick hits, and we'll get you out of here. I'll start with one off the dome right now. How many times in your time since you've been here have you been asked red or green?
72 times.
That's it? Really? I would have figured maybe triple digits.
No. I think 72.
No, you've been to a lot of games at the Pit this season. You were at the game last night. Is there a game that stands out in terms of just the atmosphere? Obviously, that building can get rocking. You're like, man, this is something.
The San Diego State game really stood out to me, and that was a great crowd and sellout. I think that was their we tied basketball with sellouts in the pit this year for the first time, probably maybe ever. I don't know.
I think probably maybe ever.
Yeah,
I think so.
We each had one sellout this year. And that one really got me, and then it was fun. I thought probably the football best memory was the San Diego State game as well. So both of those San Diego State games at home, kicking their butts out of the league, sending them off to wherever they're headed. That was pretty awesome, and great atmospheres for both those games.
You get in the car to drive over here. Your phone's hooked up to Bluetooth and all that. What music are you putting on?
You know what? I was listening to sports radio.
Sports radio, really? What station? No free ads, but
no free. Yeah, Symbieta, the guy from the
bowl
game and stuff. Yeah,
there we go. Yeah, a good show. You're a football guy. You're also a basketball guy in a lot of respects. We don't have a bracket yet. Do you have a Final Four yet?
I don't. I think one thing I've lost over time of life is I really don't follow it a ton during the regular season. I like rooting for the Lobos. I'll check on other coaches. I'll check Patino's score once in a while. Mm-hmm. I'll check the men's and women's basketball coach at Idaho. I liked both those guys. I thought were good guys. I'll check their scores that way, but I really don't follow it close enough. I mean, I know Duke's good this year. Arizona's good. There's a lot of the same. Michigan's really good, but I'm not sitting down to watch a lot of those games. I do. I'm into the Mountain West basketball once in a while. I was following the games Tuesday night and excited when UNLV wins and Boise State wins, and I'm like, heck, we control our own destiny.
Do you have a national championship pick, maybe?
Not yet.
Not yet, man.
Not yet. I'll try to watch some hoops here these next few weeks and watch some of these conference tournaments and see if I can get an opinion for you.
You might be at risk of alienating some people here, but of course you've been out here for a bit. Do you have a favorite restaurant yet?
There's a lot of good restaurants here, which is a nice thing. Probably if my wife and I are going out to dinner, I'd say two places we really like are Antiquity down in Old Town.
A Richard Pitino favorite.
Yep, he's the one who recommended that place to me. And then I like Vintage, which is it's close to my house, up off Paseo. I think they have a good filet mignon. So those places stand out. And then, there's so many other just, good spots. Going to Barella's for breakfast. Love going to Frontier. They're so great to us. And, the breakfast burritos. I found yesterday, I felt really like a true New Mexican because I had burritos for all 3 meals yesterday, which might have been the first time in my life I've had burritos for all 3 meals.
I know you like horse racing too. Do you have a schedule this summer? Are you doing Kentucky? Are you doing anything else beyond that?
Going to the Kentucky Derby. Mm-hmm. So excited about that. I've been following along with the preps and everything, but that's probably the only ones I'll get to. In person this year. We'll see. Maybe the one in town, it kind of overlaps a lot with our football season when they have their thoroughbred meet.
So they're moving Ruidoso Downs, their summer meet, up to Albuquerque. Oh. So May to August, May to Labor Day, they will have a ton of horse racing.
I probably will go over there. I'm not as big of a quarter horse fan as thoroughbreds, but I'm sure I'll get over there. Paul Blanchard, who runs that complex over there, is a great Lobo, former football player. So I'm excited for that. We wanted to go to Ruidoso. We planned to have a booster event last year in Ruidoso at the track one day, and then the floods hit down there, which was a shame. But I'd love to get down. The Sunland. One time I got to get down to Sunland Park because they have the Sunland Derby, which is a pretty good Derby prep. I have not made it. I stopped by there once when they weren't running when I was down there recruiting just to kind of check it out. But the only one that's booked right now is the Derby. So.
Baseball season right around the corner. I know you're a Cubs guy. Do you have an all-time favorite Cub?
Probably Ryan Sandberg, who just passed away.
Yeah.
I loved Ryan Sandberg. He was a favorite. I made sure when I was at Idaho, I would always stop by his high school, which didn't really have any football players, but they had a nice little shrine to him, like in the lobby of the high school and stuff at North Central High School in Spokane, Washington. But he was a favorite. I liked Andre Dawson a lot too. I like Sean Dunston. I like Rick Sutcliffe. But I think I think my favorite was Ryan Sandberg.
I thought you were gonna maybe say like a Derek Lee or something like that, and then I realized
I'm old.
You're
I'm old.
a little older. Last one.
I'm excited too that they have an Albuquerque guy now on the Cubs with Bregman. So
last one. On the same note, you have a favorite spot in Wrigleyville?
Murphy's bleachers, probably.
Yeah. Okay. There we go.
I like Murphy's bleachers. Myself and Mark Tauscher got in some trouble there over the years. One of my good buddies from college.
All right, we will save those stories for off the air later. But Jason, thank you so much for coming on today, man. I really appreciate you coming in here and doing this with me, man.
Appreciate it, Sean. Those up.